Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. It's me, Katie Montgomery, your favorite internet trans person on YouTube with a red background, which is the ultimate title to have. This week, we are talking to Dylan Hamilton, who is mainly a climate activist, but who was recently involved in some protests at Edinburgh University, and it kind of became like, I guess, an almost national news story. Because it was about a transphobic film, which you may or may not have seen in the news. Perhaps it was more of a story in Scotland than England, but I think I still saw it in the news. But anyway, and then we're going to discuss that, and it's going to be a good time. And at the end of the show, I have a fun Scotland-based announcement, which will be fun. So if we're gonna have a discussion, we're gonna find out what this film was about. We're gonna find out what the protest was about, on some of the funny things that went down, and if you would like to ask any questions of me or of Dylan, then you're welcome to ask in the chat. Please tag me in so that I see it. And if you do a super chat, then I'll be much more likely to see it, but please don't feel obliged. But I will definitely go through all of those at the end. But anyway, let's get Dylan on and say hello. So, yay, hello Dylan. How are you? Who are you? Why are you here? Who are you?
I don't even know who I am. No, I'm a climate activist. So I've been on Twitter for a while now. But yeah, so I do a bunch of protesty type stuff, and I helped block a screening, and people got really mad at me for that, and now I'm here.
Yeah, so we were just talking just before we started, and I was like, oh, back when I started on Twitter in 2016, you were like, oh yeah, I was still at school then. I was like, oh God. But you seem like, even though you are comparatively young to me, you seem like to have done loads of like protest stuff. Like you've been quite involved with climate justice things and been on the BBC loads, and so what's your grandest thing that you've done in terms of climate stuff? What are you most
Oof,
proud of?
grandest. Definitely the mobilizations. So when I just turned 15, we did like a massive global strike, and I think there were 7 million people in the world that took part, which was kind of cool. It
Really?
was 20,000 in Edinburgh and another 20,000 in Glasgow, and it was really cool.
Mate,
So that
that's
was quite
pretty
cool.
intense. That's
Yeah.
like making a difference. Have you thrown soup at a painting yet? Sorry,
Sorry,
it's
what?
probably. Have you thrown soup at a painting yet?
Oh, I have not done that, no, but one of my friends has like soup earrings, so it's quite fun. It's mostly just to annoy people who would get mad at that kind of
Yeah, I
thing.
know. Like that's kind of like. I mean, obviously the biggest benefit is getting people talking about the climate and like things to do, but I am enjoying how much it winds up the shittest people on earth. Um, like when I first saw the first soup. Sorry, I know this is probably nothing to do with you, but I just said my soup thing now. When I first saw the soup thing, they threw it over this painting. For a few seconds, I was like, oh, I don't think I actually like that. And then they're like, but it was behind glass, and I'm like, oh, okay then. And then I saw all the rage happening, and I was like, oh, I love this.
Yeah, it's so complicated. We have like the discussions internally, but it is nice seeing exactly the right people getting angry on Twitter.
Yeah,
It's like, haha,
exactly.
seethe.
If you got Piers Morgan raging, then you've probably achieved something, even if nothing else. So that's a success. But yeah, so um, basically, you're in the Edinburgh region somewhere. I'm not trying to dox you. And Edinburgh University. I don't know. So how did you hear? They announced they were going to show some transphobic film, or what? Like what? How did you find
Yeah,
out?
I can't remember how we found out. We've got a few people just kind of watching. That sounds really ominous. We've got no people just kind of keep an eye on that stuff because not long ago there was a pro-life event and people disrupted that as well. So there's kind of like already a kind of setting there.
Mm.
So a friend I think, just sent it to me and they were like, this isn't good. I was like, no, that's not good. And then we kind of ended up with like a group chat and we were like discussing what we were going to do and we settled on, you know, we'll try and make them cancel it beforehand. We'll complain to the uni because obviously it's just unacceptable to have that kind of hate. Um, Eventually, they actually took the tickets off Eventbrite, but they've just moved them on the platform. So yeah, eventually we had to
Yeah.
settle on we'll just disrupt it.
So I've noticed that Eventbrite has hosted a lot of gender critical stuff and has recently started reacting and like taking stuff off because they had some book tour and they had some meeting and maybe some Julie Bindel event and all of it got like cancelled and they were quite angry at that. So originally you got Eventbrite to cancel Eventbrite, whatever it is. to cancel this, but then they just still managed to go ahead and do it anyway. That's quite
Yeah, I
frustrating.
mean, they've tried to screen this like a few times. I think there's been a lot of ones in the UK that have been cancelled, where like the venue's been like, wait a minute, what is this?
Yeah.
But not Edinburgh Uni. They think it's a valid opinion to have.
And lots of the unis are, I mean, I think it's like because we've got this like far right government in power at the moment. I mean, you kind of have a far right government in power because you've got Westminster, but you've also got your own one, which isn't nearly as bad. You know, I don't know where they actually are on the political spectrum, but they're not as far right as the UK's main central government. But one of their big things is they're stressing about free speech at university. So that just means we want more right wing people to come and say racist stuff, basically. But so I think that kind of comes under this pressure. I think the universities are under some pressure to take bullshit things. But yeah, so I thought we could but it got to the point where they were going to host this event. But I thought I'd just look at, maybe we can get up this film and just have a look. I was just searching for it. It is on IMDb. I searched for adult human female because that's what it's called, because that's their little slogan thing. And there's two things that came up. And one of them is Posey Parker and Venice Allen, who are some names that people might recognise. Adult human females. And it's on the Brendan O'Neill show. So I don't know if everyone knows who Brendan O'Neill is, but he has some very dubious opinions about feminism. I think would be the nicest way to describe him. Absolute garbage person. And of course, that is why he hosted these two. But anyway, here is the film, and possibly the best, most high quality graphic design poster I've ever seen in my life. Let's see if we can get a zoom in on that. Does it just go big if I click it? Oh, look at this. Incredible. So I guess this is a female, and this is a violent male with a drill for a leg or something.
Or is it the male like symbol thing?
Yeah, I guess it's trying to do, like, come in and attack those innocent females. Very low budget. A Reality Matters production. Very cringe. But
Yeah.
there isn't much stuff on here apart from who's in it. It's got some good names. It's got Julie Bindel, it's got Karen Ngala Smith, Jane Claire Jones, some real quality people. Rebecca Wershbale. Yeah, so some people I've heard of. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, lol. Oh no, it's gonna make me sign in. Oh, screw that. I can't be involved with that. But yeah, so I guess, well, one of the things I was gonna ask is, have you seen this film? Have you seen any of it? Do you know anything about it or what's going on in it? What inspired you to oppose it, other than the people?
Yeah, I mean, the title was pretty obvious. It's not going to be a good film. Who made it and everything? It's the classic dog whistle. It's a bizarre dog whistle because like a trans woman is also an adult human female.
Oh no,
so
stupid, isn't it?
It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, a few of us were like, we should watch this so we like know exactly what's in it. And then I wasn't really involved in the statement process, but we made like a statement of kind of listing why we were against it, and then we handed that out during the disruption because we didn't really want to engage with people. So we had like a whole list. It's on Twitter as well. You can see it there.
Oh, yeah, I should find it. Do you know where it is?
Yeah. It's in my thread somewhere.
Maybe if I search statement from you, would that come up?
It was in the Student Staff Solidarity Network.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Remember the username.
Is that going to come up easy?
But yeah, so it's got a lot of dubious stuff. I mean, I don't even know to describe it. It's just the classic kind of fear mongering and being pressured as a lesbian to like penises as if that's actually happening.
Yeah.
So,
is it any of these?
The top one.
Okay.
Yeah. So people think it was organised by the Staff Student Solidarity Network, but no, they were just happy to post it for us.
That's cool.
But a couple news have reported it as being that organisation.
Right, yeah. I mean, the news never puts any effort in at all when it's finding out about stuff that supports trans people. What have we got here? Probably shouldn't have my DMs up on the screen. Should have found this before. Oh, here we go.
Oh yeah,
Oh man, that's
yeah.
quite.
It's really long. We wanted to have everything in it.
Yeah, exactly. The assertion that trans women are men is a transphobic statement. Agree. Oh, and the film hinges on the assertion that trans women are men. I mean, yeah, I feel like I could probably write a film like this. I can make the gender critical argument. I know what they're gonna say. It's the same boring.
I mean,
stuff.
you wouldn't manage to do the like excellent like video editing quality that they have. It's like pristine.
If it is good,
it's so funny.
If it's as good as their graphic design, then
it might even be better than their graphic design.
Amazing. The stats on crime cited in the film do not support its claims. It's not even good when it's like you made up the stats, but it's like the stats you have provided don't even back up what you say.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of main thing about it, because the whole thing is like academic freedom. It's like, well, you're not actually sharing facts. If you have facts, then fair enough, but you're just sharing an opinion that's based in a bad belief. I don't want to say bad belief, like wrong.
Yeah.
That still sounds bad. Hateful.
Well, I mean, some beliefs are just wrong. I mean, if you believe that there's like 3 suns and they're all blue and they're all in the center of our solar system, that's just factually false, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of the stuff in, obviously, gender critical is a big, wide belief system in terms of it's not just a single thing, but there's different parts to it, and some of it is opinion. Like if you think trans people are lesser and less deserving of rights, then really that's an opinion. As garbage. But lots of it is just factually false. Lots of their like world belief system, and as we've just seen them lose in court in Scotland. Did you see about that?
I did, yeah.
That was quite satisfying. For anyone who doesn't know, basically there was a so there's a Scottish anti-trans group called For Women Scot, and they basically kind of took the government to court over the government wanted to include trans women in their at least 35% of all board members must be women new regulation, and they lost originally, then they appealed it, and then they won, and then they kind of like appealed it again, and then they lost again. It was a funny situation. It's worth reading more on about. But anyway, so this screening was like starting to go ahead, and you guys were like, "Let's do a thing." What was the discussion beforehand? Were you worried that this was gonna blow up into a big news thing?
I mean, honestly, we did not think about the news. We didn't think it would be anything particular. I mean, we thought they'd moan about it on Twitter, and they did, but we didn't think it would blow up quite so much. But I mean, I can kind of see why, because it's the first time I think people have like physically said no, like in person. You're not having this. This is a red line. You're not crossing it, which I think is really, really important. And a lot of people have said it was like really motivational. But yeah, we weren't particularly organized. It's quite funny. I think they think we're like some colluding secret organization, but I honestly don't know half of the people's names, and we like met the day before to plan what we were doing. So yeah, that was pretty much it. And honestly, a lot of the plan didn't even happen. We were making it up as we went along.
Yeah, so what was was the plan just like turn up and like were you planning to stop them from watching it? Was that the plan from the start?
Yeah, the kind of end goal was you're not having your film. Sorry. Sucks, I guess. I think originally we thought we would just kind of come in during it, like while people were going into the hall and like stand at the front or something. I'm quite glad we didn't do that, because that would have been quite confrontational with like us facing them. Like it could have got quite tense. But they didn't even get into the hall, so instead we did like a get there really early and just kind of occupy it thing. And a few groups have like occupied stuff at Edinburgh Uni before. It's a really common studenty thing. So they knew what they were doing, and I didn't end up in that group. I stayed outside to like kind of see how things were going, and just kind of watch security, and I could give them a heads up about what they were discussing and stuff. And then they tried to move room, and we heard them, so we told the group inside, and the group inside split in half, and half of them went to block the new room before they thought they'd have any idea of knowing. So that was quite funky. And then they were like, we're changing building. So we went up, and then we blocked that door as well. It was quite funny.
Yeah, so I saw that there had been some running around comments, like people moving to like different rooms and stuff. And I saw some gender critical people accusing you, the protesters, of being ableist because you ran and they weren't able to run. Um, they love misusing terms like calling people sexist when they don't actually know what sexism is. And I thought that's pretty good because it's just like, I mean, there is an obvious age divide in the average age of the person supporting trans rights and the average age of the person opposing trans rights. I mean, that's probably true of every civil rights movement, but it's definitely true of trans rights. And just the idea of like, them darn kids can run faster than us, like this is a bad thing. It's just like, oh,
It's
come
so
on.
bizarre because they've also been incredibly ableist to their thing. Like I was beside a trans woman who wasn't even involved in like the organizing. She was just there, and she kind of ended up in the picket while looking for a bathroom. And she'd had surgery on her chest recently, and they were pushing into her. She was like, "I've had surgery on my chest. This hurts. Can you please stop?" And they didn't stop. So it's kind of ironic that they're like, "Oh, ableism," and also they're giving us shit for wearing masks. They're like, "You were intimidating us," and it's like, "There's a pandemic."
It's very often that those views go together for some reason, for some strange reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I guess one of the things that comes out of anything like this, and it would have been something that I was thinking about going in, I guess, and maybe some people did, maybe some it wasn't something you discussed so much, is they're gonna try and frame this as a freedom of speech thing. And something I noticed you mentioned earlier was you printed out your like views on this film to hand out to engage with them. And that's like, I mean, a freedom of speech issue would be if the government said this film is banned, then it's like censored. If the government was stopping people from selling or watching this film in the country. Um, but if it's like they want to have a public screening at a university, then it's not a free speech issue if the university says no, because like you can still watch this film in your home, you can still organize your own private event in your house or something you own, or even find a private business owner to do it. Um, but when it's at the university and you're not stopping them from um, watching it elsewhere, and also you were trying to engage with them. I mean, maybe that was a bit pointless, but I can at least it like the it's something, isn't it? Like you're not just trying to say, "Fuck off." We're not even going to tell you why we're disagreeing with this.
Yeah, because we knew like if we engaged in any kind of dialogue, we knew it was going to go south like really quickly, and we didn't want to kind of just end up arguing with them. So we thought it would be easier because we would have kind of one line, and nobody had to stress about what they were going to say, but also safer because it's quite confrontational if you're just kind of like, I'm not speaking to you, I'm not talking to you, I'm not saying anything. But it's also confrontational if you argue with them. So if we're just like, oh, here's our statement, you can read that, it's got everything on it. Some of them were pissed off at that even, but yeah. But the free speech thing is interesting. I mean, people really underestimate the role of media in like every kind of hateful thing in history. Like the main resurgence of, I mean, I try not to compare it to like the racial rights movement or anything, but the main resurgence of the KKK in the early 1900s was because of a film. It was even played in the White House called Birth of a Nation. So films can spread hate, and it's completely naive to say that they can't. And some films need to not be shown because they're going to give people specific ideas that are dangerous. So that was kind of our logic behind it. You're not sharing this dangerous thing in a place of learning. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I mean it's always difficult because in one like there could be an argument that the only people who are going to watch this are the cultists anyway, like all the people who are already indoctrinated into this stupid worldview, and by banning it and getting it in BBC News, now suddenly loads of people want to know what it is. But then at the same time, if you let it just get screened at university, then all the other universities are like, well, they screened it at Edinburgh, no one made a fuss then, so it must be fine to show. And then it gets shown a lot more, and then there's no opposition. And then when the opposition does happen, it's like too little, too late. And I think there's always like
Yeah.
it's a difficult line to tread, and you do have to think about that kind of thing. Like if it was one person standing on a street corner saying something, and you come and protest them with like 1,000 people, that would probably get their message out there better than they could have ever hoped. So it is always difficult, but I do think that like I changed my mind on this actually because of video by a Scottish person called Lonabox, who's on YouTube, who was saying about Scotland's history of like opposing fascism and why it never really kicked off in Scotland in the same way that it did in like lots of the rest of Europe in the 30s, including in England. And basically all the Scottish anti-fascists just turned up to everything every single time, like no matter what it was, and just made a massive like mess and such opposition that the fascists just don't want to, they can't be bothered because they're like, oh, if we do an event then they're going to turn up and they're going to steal our things and they're going to, you know, oppose us. And part of fascism as like a overall thing is feeling powerful, isn't it? And like like feeling they can dominate, because like they can watch this film anywhere, they already believe this, it means nothing to them. Watching it in a public place is a sign of strength and also a like sign to each other that this is normal. And when you turn up and be like, no, this isn't normal, fuck off, then like that's a good, so that anyway, that's my opinion. I don't know if you agree, but yeah, I think that's,
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky one with like when does it like promote their issue, but I think there needs to be a hard line somewhere. And as you say, there's a long history of this kind of thing. So like personally, I feel really proud of it because I know I'm coming after so many people who've just
yeah,
said, no, fuck off. Absolutely not. And maybe it's a particularly Scottish thing. I mean, that kind of like gritty determination. Like, I don't know, like a kind of similar thing for why I'm probably like this is my gran, for example. Her house had like this person would graffiti it, and every single day she would go out and she would clean it off, and then they'd do it, and she'd clean it off, and then they'd do it again. She's going to like they're just going to keep doing it. She's like, and I will keep cleaning it off every single time, and it's that kind of thing, I guess. Like we don't have a chance to like be outlasted by them, because if we're outlasted, then we cease to exist, or like we
yeah,
have a pretty miserable existence. So we have to outlast in the argument. And yeah, I think it's the normalizing thing is a big part of it. I also think they need to know they're going to be challenged.
yes,
I think I
yeah,
said in my thread something like, you don't get to spread hate and just expect it to not be challenged. Which does tie into the free speech thing, but honestly, nobody believes in complete free speech. Everybody has lines. I mean, they have lines, because if I say something, they're like, oh, shut up. Or like, for
yeah,
example, Greta Thunberg got involved and they're like, oh, shut up, you clearly don't know what you're talking about. It's like, okay, so clearly you don't believe in complete free speech.
yeah.
Um,
And
yeah,
also,
nobody believes in it.
and yeah, so obviously that's like one side of the argument is nobody believes in like total freedom of speech apart from maybe like the guy with the biggest gun. But like also in it, if you let like hateful people speak freely, openly on huge platforms, then the minorities they're targeting don't have freedom of speech because they start stirring up prejudice against them. They get deplatformed. They get oppressed in the streets. They get the rights taken away. They have less of a voice. And like we can just see that the British media has been platforming anti-trans hatred for years and years and years. Like probably before you were born. No, it's like so in this block, like for the last, like 10 years, I guess. And that means that trans people have less of a voice. We don't get invited on the news channels because they're all asking questions about whether we should exist. And then trans people get worn out and don't have the energy to fight for these things. And so it takes away our freedom of speech by letting them say, not just express their opinion. They can express their opinion, spreading like falsehoods that could be fact checked by the media and just aren't. But yeah, so going back to the like protest thing, I saw some videos going around social media. Did you worry about like were they all filming? Because I know sometimes at protests now everyone's like filming each other in each other's face. Did you get filmed? Were you worried about that?
I mean, we knew they would, but what I think was particularly funny is some of our people were also filming, and some of their people shouted, "You're assaulting me by filming me." And we were like, that's really not how assault works. It's not
Especially when you're doing
I
it
mean,
too.
I think it almost works against them because they just look ridiculous when they whip their phones out and they're like, "Ha ha, I'm filming you," and I'm like, "Okay, I'm just standing here." Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one incident which got a load of views on Twitter at least, which was someone they were just kind of standing there and like someone jamming a camera in their face and they said you know, leave me alone. I'm an adult human female too, or something. And they were like, ah, trans males. Ah. But that's actually one thing I was going to say. They spent a lot of time calling you a violent trans male. And then you were like, well, I'm a trans man. Then suddenly, oh no, you're obviously female. Oh.
It's so funny. It's like you can't have it both ways. Either we're listening to women, in which case you clearly believe that's what I am, so you have to listen to me, or I'm a terrifying, intimidating, evil man, in which case you do believe trans identities are real. So like, which one is it?
There's this
And
essay by Holly Lawford Smith that I always bring up in things like this, where she genuinely made the argument trans women are men, but also trans men are men. And there's actual thing, like it's similar to a position Maya Forstater holds from Sex Matters, where she's like, we need like trans women shouldn't be in women's bathrooms because they have magical male souls, but trans men shouldn't be in women's bathrooms either because they look like men. So we can't have either.
yeah, it's really bizarre. It really shows their weird kind of like bioessentialism almost. Like trans men are clearly not a threat because they're inherently women and women aren't dangerous. Like they don't believe we're really men, but they don't believe we're a threat because we don't have that inherent maleness because we're not real men. So it's a bizarre thing. Like
Yeah,
people treat me completely differently when they think I'm like an intimidating cis man versus when they think I'm like a confused female.
yeah. So confused. Why are you so confused, Dylan?
Maths is weird. It confuses me.
But yes, I another thing, like I've been quite put off protests. I know I think you were saying just before we started about like that you've done quite a lot of protests. I put off protests in real life because I find them kind of depressing. Um because it feels like you're almost like begging for your rights. Like it's just like just go away, like leave us alone. I don't know, do you feel depressed from something like this, or do you feel like empowered, or
It really depends on so many things. I mean, most of the protests I've done have been climate ones, and usually I feel really good after them because it's kind of a way of coping with like the climate anxiety, I guess, when you're with all these people who share the same kinds of like anger and stuff. And I think one of the best ways to not end up depressed about climate change is to get angry about it. And marches and stuff kind of provide that space for it. And even the smaller weekly protests we did, you know, you're hanging out with people who have similar thoughts about this stuff, and we did have quite a big effect, so it felt pretty good.
yeah?
Trans stuff definitely feels different for me, like quite different. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm patronized in both senses, but the patronizing and the conversation around about trans stuff is so nasty, which is
Mm.
really saying something because it's not like the stuff around climate is like nice. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they just feel a bit sad, but even then, like there's something powerful about like collective grief. I think sharing it with people is very important. So like even though the Trans Day Remembrance stuff is very sad, it was still it felt good to share it with people and not
Yeah.
just sit alone with those feelings. Um, so I think that's really important. They're not necessarily just a protest; they're also kind of a collective coping thing. And sometimes they feel very powerful. I think this one felt very powerful because we got what we wanted, and they know to expect that kind of thing now. They can't just waltz around.
Yeah, exactly. I think like Scotland really seems to be winning on this, and they must like I feel in their energy, like they've one of their like things the gender critical movement is very good is it just bigging up even the slightest thing in their favor as like some giant win. They describe everything as groundbreaking and like really good at self promotion about how big a winners they are, but they've had a lot of losses in a row, and like this is just another one. But lots in Scotland in particular, like they had this court case that was last week. They had this, you know, your protest thing. They've got the GRA reform vote this week, which is likely to go through. But you can feel it in their energy, and I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I guess powerful is the right word. It can make you feel powerful to have things going away. I don't know how to say it, but
Yeah, yeah, things
it
are wild. I mean, Sorry, were you going to
No,
speak?
no, no. Go on, go on.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think the kind of tear stuff almost was revived here, which is bizarre. I did not think that the main split in the independence movement was going to be trans rights. That came as a bit of a shock. But if you think about it, kind of the main people who started like pushing it were like Joanna Cherry in the Scottish Parliament, Joan McAlpine and J.K. Rowling, all of whom are based in Scotland. So it did kind of come out of it, and like it's a huge split in our politics because within it's so connected to independence, and obviously you wouldn't necessarily know that if you were based in England, but there's obviously like two different kinds of independence support. So I should clarify, I do support independence, but I support it from a progressive perspective. I think it means we can, be a more left-leaning country where people have more rights and have better lives. And then there's the kind of more like nationalistic sides where
Yeah.
it's like the flag, I like the haggis and that kind of thing. So it's really hard to have a movement that's like 50% of the population and not have something split. So the split ended up trans rights because why not? Um, the progressive kind of independent side being like, yeah, we like rights, and then the other side who just don't really care about that kind of thing. Um, yeah. So we did have a big part in like setting it off.
Yeah,
But
for
again,
sure.
the average Scot is like more progressive, I guess. So
Yeah.
it's kind of worked out all right ish.
I think that because you had like Alba, the party was so at I'm not the expert on Scottish politics, but from my understanding, I've ended up in this situation where I probably know and have talked with more members of Scottish Parliament than of the like English and Wales or the UK one, however it's described, just because it's for a while in Scotland it was more of a thing. There were more politicians who were willing to speak pro-trans rights than they were in England, so that ended up just in that weird situation. Um, but you had Alex Salmond, who was like the head of the SNP or something, and then there were allegations by multiple women against him, which he was cleared of, but not like proved innocent of. Like I think I don't know the full story, but basically he I don't know. You don't get accused by 6 women or however many it was, 9. I can't remember the exact number. I don't know. Not going to say anything that could involve a court case, but he had some dubious vibes and like dropped off, and then he started this new party, Alba, which is like the UKIP of Scottish national politics, um, and he one of their things was anti-trans rights. That was like one of their like main like deliveries on their first kind of thing, and then they got absolutely wrecked in the polls, and it was hilarious. Uh, but
Yeah,
I
it's
do
really
think
funny.
that even in Scotland, where now this has become like quite a national issue, um, and you've got this vote going through and all this kind of stuff, still most people just don't care. I don't know if you get the same vibe, but
Yeah, I definitely get that vibe. I mean, I remember like I try and explain it to just kind of people in my life, and they're just like, "What?" It's completely bizarre because it's such this like echo chamber almost. So maybe people are completely unaware of it and they just don't care. Like it's so just not a big deal.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's really weird.
I find that like you say, like my friends, obviously they support my rights as a person and think I should be allowed to get married and things, and they're always horrified when I say what's going on, and it's not that they don't care, but like when you start discussing like the ins and outs, unless I just say all of the funny things that have happened or say all the things they need to do, you could be like, oh, well, there's this person and so and so's name and stuff, and I feel like none of them really care about this. None of them need to know who Joanna Cherry is. None of them need like they just normal people don't care about this stuff. And once you sort of take out the names and their various campaigns that are going on, when it's like, what does a random cis person on the street have to do? Well, if they support the trans people in their life, and if they're ready to write to their MP when the time comes for the various things, like what do they care? Like what is there to say? And from the anti-trans
Mm.
side, like if you're not the kind of person who's instantly disgusted at the idea of trans people, then what are they saying that you care about? Like you'd be like, oh, we don't want men in women's spaces, and you're like, oh, okay, what does that mean? Why are you saying that? And they're like, because these disgusting trans people. And you're like, oh, no, you're just an idiot then. I'm no longer interested.
Yeah, it's really weird when they do that. When they're like, it's not transphobic. It's like your beliefs are inherently shaped by the idea that you don't believe someone can change gender. So clearly you are. like that. Like that's how it works. But yeah, I think that is the interesting one because there are a lot of people who like they don't really believe someone can change gender, but they don't care because it doesn't affect them. And I feel like there should be more of that. Like I understand gender dysphoria is a really weird concept if you haven't experienced it. It's bizarre, but like you don't have to understand something to accept it, and like all the evidence says that it's fine.
Yeah. I always, my point on that is I always say, like, we often get calls on my call-in show and like, oh, I don't get non-binary people. And I'm like, I don't get non-binary people. I don't get trans men and I don't get cis men. Why the hell would you want to be any of those things when you could be a woman?
Yeah,
I don't get it. But that doesn't mean I have to
exactly.
oppose, like, your existence.
Exactly. Like I don't get trans women. Like why would you want boobs? That does not make sense to me. But it's like you do you, I guess.
Well, exactly. Like, why do you need to get people? I don't get most people's cultures and religions and belief systems and stuff. But if they're not trying to harm me, um, and or harm others, then I'm not going to try and wipe them out or take away their rights or ban them from the toilet
Yeah.
or whatever. And yeah. Anyway, I guess bringing it more back onto this film, like that's why, like these film things are so tedious because I guess that they always have 2 points to any of this kind of stuff, and I think at this stage, the main goal of these kind of things is like um, echo chamber reinforcement, like strengthening of the cult. Like they would have probably been some people that are like, oh, you should come along to this screening, come along to our like thing, you know, they're recruiting someone to a cult. But lots of them would have already been like neck deep in GC ideology. Um, but the thing is, if you constantly you need the constant reinforcement to do this, and they would have got that from watching this film. They would have come out feeling in like justified more in their beliefs,
Exactly.
and you know, breaking that kind of chain to stop them, like because, well, like we were just saying, lots of people don't care, but I also think that lots of the gender critical people wouldn't care if they were just taken out of their horrible echo chamber,
Yeah.
which constantly feeds them with propaganda every day. If they were out of that for like 6 months,
Mm.
they wouldn't even meet a trans person. It wouldn't affect their life. So
Yeah, I mean, I really do sympathize with a lot of them, to be honest, because a lot of them, I mean, they're older, right? So they grew up in like 60s, 70s, and things did suck for women, particularly then.
mm-hmm.
They're a lot better now. They're obviously not even close to perfect, but I can kind of sympathize with that, like, extremely misdirected kind of anger at the patriarchy and everything they've experienced. But, you have to then reflect in on yourself that what you're fighting for is enforced gender roles with this whole thing of men are inherently evil rather than men make choices to be bad. Like
And the
it almost
system
removes
informs
the
their
kind of
decisions. Yeah.
it almost removes like responsibility from the men who are like offenders because it's like, oh well, you're inherently a man, this is just what men do. It's almost boys will be boys.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, well, no,
Absolutely.
men don't have to act like that.
I find that, like, I was having this argument today actually. Lots of the time, they got this pink brain, blue brain. They're like, oh, trans people believe in pink brain and blue brain. Like, oh, if you like pink, then you're a girl or whatever. And firstly, that's not a thing that any trans person argues. But secondly, this idea of pink brain, blue brain, of like innate behavioral differences, is literally the gender critical core belief. It's that
Yeah.
no matter what happens, if you are born with a male soul, whatever definition of sex they're going with today, genitals or gonads or whatever, then that's it. There's nothing that can happen. No amount of change to your life, biologically, medically, socially, anything can affect that, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I think it's well, you know, one of my favorite phrases at the moment is all conservative accusations are admissions, because that's
Yeah.
kind of true. But yeah, so on the protest, do you feel like it went as well as it could have? Could have gone better? What would you do
I
differently?
mean,
Would you recommend this to other people? So say we find out in whoever's watching hometown, they're getting a gender critical film, should they copy your model? What could they do better?
I mean, first try and get it cancelled, I guess, but it's quite funny because they're like, you're cancelling me. I'm like, yes. Correct. Like, we don't want that to take place in the, I mean, you generate a conversation when you have the physical protest, but you do want to avoid that. It's a last resort. It's not safe, frankly. You're exposing yourself to a lot of things, but I would recommend doing it. I think it feels very powerful and it sends a very strong message of you will be challenged. This isn't acceptable. Soz. But you have to be very, very careful. Be careful with your narrative. Be careful for why you're doing it. Don't try and be like a hero and like sacrifice yourself, because it's a dangerous situation. We were blocked into a corridor with people screaming at us. It was quite dangerous. Yeah, and make sure you have like people you can trust, and like don't just go home after. Like go and hang out and like chill out a bit and try and process what happened, because it was quite scary. Like at one point, me and one other person were like trapped, and they said you're not leaving, and like we said you're not coming in, but you can leave. But they stood there and like there in this like thin hallway, and we were in the middle like you're not leaving, haha. I think they were trying to goad us into like going through, but like that's kind of scary, especially when I'd heard them earlier saying like, oh, we can just rush them, we can take them. Like they clearly wanted to hurt us. It was quite wild actually to see in person. It was almost like they were much worse than I expected them to be, which is saying something. So yeah, like do it, challenge them, but think it through, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about hanging out with people afterwards, because there can be a lot of pent up tension and like fear and worry and stuff. And then if you're just suddenly on your own, I can imagine that'd be quite emotionally overwhelming. I know that the last trans rights protest I went to, like I went to this protest thing and then kind of like went off on my own for a bit, and I just kind of felt really garbage. And then luckily I bumped into some friends who were having a picnic, and then I just got really drunk, and that was good. But also, yeah, on your saying that it was more scary than you thought, like part of, and I guess for anyone who's watching this who isn't, like either part of, like strongly pro-trans rights, or who isn't really aware of what goes on, one of the main narratives of the gender criticals is that they're just poor, innocent, defenseless women, and trans people are all violent males like Dylan, who will attack them at a moment's notice. And like we just saw with the adult human female cover, get it back up. Like it's like we said, it's kind of like a man attacking a woman or something. But and like that's their like main narrative, but in reality that's just not the case at all. And like we just saw this in the USA, with Posey Parker was doing her countrywide tour, and I don't think she was present in this particular incident, but some of her tour mate crew people, who I could say the names of but won't, they went to near a school and started protesting near a school with some trans kids in, and then there was a protest outside, and then the gender critical people just maced some children, like bear spray or whatever it's called, pepper spray, and like what the fuck, like that's just grim. And afterwards on Twitter, like some of them were saying, oh, they were in their rights to shoot them, so you should be lucky it was just mace, which is horrifying. And I know that the USA is a lot more violent, but some of the people watching will be from the USA, and it's worth just bearing that in mind if you go to protests. But also, like, these are similar people that come to the UK ones, they're just less able to have weapons. But one of the things that's happened at a lot of Posey Parker's events, like strangely, all of the events that she goes to ends up with some kind of scrap. And sometimes, like 2 in a row, involved the same gender critical woman. And the videos always start mid-confrontation. You don't get the build-up. The video that appears online is just like, oh, here's 2 people having a fight. And then they'll obviously say, oh, it was the violent males, and then the newspapers will all say it's trans people starting it. But like that just, like you say, they were trying to trap you in. Like, what the fuck? Like that is way more aggressive than you can't come past us.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre how much they still try and pull the victim card. I mean, they straight up lie and say someone who was with us was spitting, and it's like, well, that didn't happen. They even shared a video of it, and they're like, look at this person spitting, and they deleted the tweet because the person obviously was not spitting. and they're like, you assaulted us. It's like, we literally just stood there deliberately trying to not be confrontational. We just want, I mean, it is obviously inherently confrontational, but we didn't want it to escalate. We really wanted to do it in the way that would be the safest for everyone involved. We even had like a plan. If someone goes at us, like, what do we do? And the first thing is like separate it and stop it. Like, I don't want to hurt these people. I strongly disagree with them, but like violence isn't the way to go. But it was very like kind of stark, I think, seeing them in person, because you know they're horrible people online, but I think it's with people you can really see what kind of person they are through their eyes.
Yeah.
I think, and just kind of seeing the like nastiness directed at us was really quite like scary. Like they wanted us hurt. They would have been happy if we'd just like fallen over and died or something, to be honest.
Yeah, I think some of that is just them being horrible people, and some of that is the transphobia, where they like it isn't just like a dislike or want to take your rights or considering you less than human or whatever. It's an act of disgust, and they want to stop you, whatever you're doing, breathing. But that they will always try and frame that as like hyperbolic when you say that, but you can see it in their words and actions.
Yeah.
That add up, and for sure they know there'll be consequences if they just went in and started punching people or whatever. But they won't. If that was to happen, then they would be happy with that happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, they say they're like scared of these evil men because men are violent. It's not fear; it's disgust.
Yeah.
Like they were far too confident. Like they were extremely confident that they were laughing and jeering and everything. They weren't scared.
That's another point that I often raise when discussing like changing rooms and toilets and stuff. When you hear of these, gender critical people confronting the trans person, they're not afraid at all. They're not. It's not like, oh, I saw this person, I ran out screaming because I was terrified. It's like I got right in their face and started shouting at them and filming them, and then you see the video and they're like just trying to get out of there, and it's like you're not scared of trans people, and this is why I think it's something I point out quite a lot is they say, oh, they think I'm a man, but they don't act that way. They don't act towards me as they do towards cis men. And you can really see it in what they say and how they say things and what actions they take, because they sure as hell might not consider me a cis woman, but they don't think I'm a man at all, and they make it clear that they think I'm some kind of lesser, like, disgusting thing.
Yeah, it's definitely tied to like feminine men is like a bad thing. I think that's really interesting because like when it's a trans man, they'll often say to me, "Oh, you're just a tomboy," as if like a masculine woman is okay. In their idea, you will get harassed for being a masculine woman, but it's not quite the same way like a feminine man will be treated. They don't want you to just become a feminine man. They don't see you as a real man either. They don't see you as a woman either. They don't want you to just go back to being a man. They want you gone.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's very stark when you kind of realize that. And it's weird seeing them try to dodge around saying that. I mean, they had that letter or something that was like mandated out of existence, direct quote. So
yeah. So from Janice Raymond's Transsexual Empire, the best way to deal with the problem of transsexualism is to morally mandate it out of existence. Hooray!
Way.
So, is there any more things that you think is relevant to this story of this protest? And if anyone has any questions for either me or Dylan about this, then now's the time to write them in the chat, tag me in, and I will see them and we can do some question times. But yeah, is there any other things you would like to raise?
I don't know. I'm just really proud of it, to be honest. Like,
oh, good.
I've had a huge amount of backlash, but like, they don't do that unless they feel threatened.
Right.
And I want them to feel that. I think the thing I've kind of shifted my opinion of this in kind of the last 5 months is you can't reason with these people. They will not be reasoned with. They will not compromise. And it's not like we can compromise either. But yeah, it just has to be sorry, you don't get to just have these films. Like, though some opinions shouldn't be heard, some opinions are damaging. And yeah, like, yeah, it is cancelled. You should be cancelled for that.
Yeah, and yeah. I think, like, I guess from the, like, my position on like all these kind of things is there's a difference between reviewing an opinion in like the marketplace of ideas, or more in a kind of neutral space to discuss something. When I encounter some new piece of information or a new idea, I want to be able to approach that and go through it. That's fine. The difference is more about broadcasting, platforming, and like the attempt at like propaganda and to campaign. That's the difference. Like, say when we say like, or at least when I'm interpreting you saying, oh, some opinions shouldn't be heard. That's not like, oh, these are forbidden ideas and like if you think them, thought police time. It's more like, well, this is just it's wrong, and we could debate that and we can show that it's wrong, but we have shown it's wrong, and that hasn't changed your mind, and it's not going to change your mind because you're, brainwashed cultist, and what you want to do is use that idea to ruin my life. And if you're not going to engage, if you're not going to have an argument, because they won't, they're like, oh, we want debate. They don't want debate. They never want to debate. They just want to steamroll and, dominate. And if that's all they're going to try and do, then we got to stop them doing that. I mean, that's just the reality of it. If they were able to, were able to change their minds, then we'd have a debate, and then they would realize that everything they're saying is fucking garbage, and then, but some people just can't change their minds, so that's the reality of it. But yeah, I'm proud too of you guys achieving that. Nice work. I'm always a bit worried when these protests go down in case they manage to get a really good media angle on it, and they didn't really seem to this time, so it's good. Right, we've got a couple of questions. Oh yeah, this is a good question from Thirthy. Sorry, that's a tongue twister for me. It says, how many of those who wanted to watch Adult Human Female weren't local? Did you get any sense of that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I think a lot of them were local, but I wasn't really like confronting any at any specific time because like the hallway was quite thin. There were only like 4 kind of people who could fit in it. I would say a lot of them were local, which I was surprised by. I thought more would come, but it was also on the day of a train strike, so perhaps people who would have come maybe couldn't.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, yeah, I think people thought more would come from abroad, but actually they were abroad. We're not independent yet. But it's also hard to tell, I guess, because accents in Scotland are so varied.
Yeah.
Loads could have come through from different places. But I do think what is interesting about who was there is they phrase it as like a university thing, but I didn't see anyone on that side who was like under 30, at least.
What a shocker.
So it was not a uni thing. So
yeah. Student Dr. Ben, who's a good friend of the channel, says Hamilton is the best surname, and I know of 3 trans men with the surname Hamilton.
The thing is, I'm so mad sometimes that I was like, if I'd been like born a couple of years earlier, my name probably would have been Alex because it's a family name and also the classic trans man name.
Yeah.
And like, if I'd been born a cis male as well, I probably like it would have been up there in like the top 3 kind of names I would have got. That just would have been funny, but you can't pick that, so I couldn't pick it. And I also like the name Thomas, but Thomas Hamilton was like a murderer, so I also couldn't pick that. So here we go.
Well, it would have gone with your violent male vibes, so.
People did say that in my reply. Yeah.
Well, when I asked my mum what I would have been called if I had been born a girl, and she said Caitlin, and this was like just around the time Caitlyn Jenner came out, I was like, not having that. Cannot pick that name anymore. It is ruined for all trans people going forward. Yeah. We've got another question here. Oh, this from someone else. So Heather Herbert says, how much support or otherwise did you get from the university? I guess not support.
I mean, some of the people involved were like student reps, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, not much from the university. We did have some really nice support from Edinburgh UCU, which isn't, inherently the university, but it's still very, very linked. The president of Edinburgh UCU was very, very supportive online, to the point where some transphobes thought he was my dad, and that was quite weird.
They love doing those little links. They love the conspiracy.
They do. Yeah, but I suspect that there's almost certainly some kind of at least sympathetic transphobes quite high up within Edinburgh. I think I did see like one of the kind of organisers, who I think was with the uni, wearing a like suffragette lanyard. So that was a bit like, yeah. So I would say we might be against a institutionalized thing.
Mate, it's so garbage that the suffragette colours now, when you see them, like there's a chance that it means that they're not a feminist and they just hate trans people.
That's so annoying.
I know, especially like when I've been talking to like American feminists, and they don't really have that. So they all love their like suffragettes colours. Though theirs is often yellow, white, and purple rather than green. I don't know if that's an American thing. I haven't actually looked into that, but they'll have the little flags and it's just like, what if? But yeah, it's not.
I've got a trans flag lanyard now though, so I'm doing like
Nice.
subtle, subtle war of like the lanyards. Yeah.
That's the real battle.
Yeah.
Durham Red says, Dylan, you're a legend. It's true. Do we have any other questions here? That might be all the questions we've got. But yeah, that was wicked. Thank you very much for coming and telling your story. I hope you feel like you got it all out and like it was good. And I hope other people feel inspired to do things, because I think, like, you know, obviously there is history of trans rights organising, but I do feel like this is the time in history when the most amount of trans people have been aware of organising and fighting for trans rights ever. And a lot of people just don't know what to do. Like I've just completely bumbled my way into what I do, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I think lots of people want to know and see what works, and I think this is probably an example of something that worked. And so it's good if you learn from it, and if you disagree with it, then come call into my show and argue with me about it. And if you support it, then, you know, maybe follow Dylan on Twitter and be at the next one. Go do some climate stuff. Go throw some soup at a painting of a gender critical person.
Or skip school or uni to come strike for climate.
Yay!
Yay!
But yeah, cool. Thank you very much, Dylan. Would you like? Have you got any projects going on? Anything to plug, or do you just want
to? Nothing to plug. All
Okay.
of Fridays for Future. But cool. I promise.
Okay. Wicked. Thank you very much for coming on, and I'm gonna let you disappear. You're welcome to hang around, and I'm just gonna tell everyone my Scotland announcement, and then I can talk to you afterwards, or you can disappear. But thank you very much. Bye. So that was great. I think it was a good discussion, and I feel like inspired by the fact that Scotland just seems to keep winning on trans rights at the moment. Maybe it won't last forever, but while it's lasting, it's quite enjoyable to watch. And maybe us in England and Wales and Northern Ireland can learn from the Scots, because they seem to be doing the best at the moment. But yeah, my Scotland announcement is not that I'm moving to Scotland. I am not moving to Scotland. England is too cold for me. It's too dark for me. I don't like it already. I'm not going further north ever in my life. Bristol is as north as I can handle. But I am speaking at Edinburgh University in January, which I'm quite excited about. So this is, you may or may not have seen my previous video. I was booked to do a talk at Warwick University, and then it got cancelled. It was a talk about hate, and it got cancelled because of hate. So much online hate, they had to get into some security. You can see that previous video about that on my YouTube channel. But I did actually do the talk, and it did actually go quite well, I think. And so I've booked to do another one, and there are some more in the works being discussed at the moment, and I need to arrange with the people who are doing them. But the Edinburgh one is locked in, and that is for the 27th, Friday the 27th of January. And I don't know any more details. But keep your eye out. I'll mention about it on Twitter. I'll probably put it on my website, katiemontgomery.com. And if you're in the area and you're, well, certainly if you're a student or staff member, then please do come down. Hopefully there'll be security. And if you're not, then they might allow some non-students in. I will find out as soon as I can. But exciting. And sorry to everyone who thought I was moving to Scotland. No. But I am visiting, so maybe we can say hi when I'm there. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching. This was a good video, and I will see you on this Thursday for the Transatlantic Call-In Show, which is probably going to be the last thing I do before Christmas. See you soon. Bye.